Welcome to Salute and Biohacking podcast. My name is Vanessa Bertinotti and my mission is to build an Italian-speaking tribe that shares my same passion for health optimization and biohacking by bringing to the table experts and people who inspire me. All the information contained in this podcast is purely informative and does not replace medical or therapeutic consultancy. On this episode, I'm super grateful and excited to welcome Wade Lightheart. We will talk about the importance of magnesium supplementation. Wade is one of the leading authorities on natural nutrition, expert on gut health and fitness optimization. He is a 3-time Canadian all-natural bodybuilding champion as a vegetarian. He is the co-founder and president at BiOptimizers. He serves as an advisor to the American Anti-Cancer Institute. He is the author of several best-selling books and the host of the Awesome Health podcast. Wade, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Vanessa. Thank you for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you here. Thank you for joining us today. I was really looking forward to chat with you because after taking your Magnesium Breakthrough, I felt such a massive change on my sleep, on my mood, and it really upgraded my quality of life. First of all, before we dive into today's topic, we have to tackle your background. Can you tell us about your journey, how you got to where you are now, and why you have decided to build your own supplement company?
Great, sure. I'll try to be as brief because it's a long journey of 35 years. I grew up in Canada, in a very rural place in the rural parts of Canada. So played hockey, and it was cold, and had to kind of operate out of carrying wood, farming, and these type of things that were relative to the area that I grew up in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a practical application of information, and my sister got ill when I was 15, and I watched her go through she was 4 years my senior, and I watched her go through the medical model for 4 years before she died at the age of 22. And my summation of that experience, it had a very deep impact on me in the standpoint that it was involved a couple of things. One, I knew that your life wasn't a guarantee, and number two, your health wasn't a guarantee. And simultaneously, when my sister just got sick, she gave me a bodybuilding magazine. And in that bodybuilding magazine had a picture of Troy Zuclato on the cover of Muscle and Fitness with two pretty girls. He had won Mr. California, and I thought, wow, I want those muscles and those girls. That was my original drive. And so I built a gym in my barn, and I would go out there and train even when it would be 25, 30 below zero in a snowsuit. And I had this dream that I was going to go to California, I was going to compete in the Mr. Universe, and I was going to have a supplement company that would sell products all around the world. And I used to tell people this when I was 15, and I went for that dream. I went to study at university studied exercise physiology at the University of New Brunswick, which is a local university in Canada, and gave me a background that I needed, like in physiology and nutrition and functional activity. But it was kind of a bunch of compartmentalized information. There was no conclusive evidence that would lead you to what I would call a high performance lifestyle. And so at that point, I started modeling people who were producing the results that I wanted, and ended up with a bodybuilding coach. And then as I was following my career trajectory that way, I was also working in and out of the industry. So, I worked in all levels of the nutritional health industry, in stores, in retails, in gyms. I even worked in warehouses. Eventually, that led to the authoring a book. I became a personal trainer and cultivated a lot of real-world experience about dealing with people one-on-one and achieving goals. Meanwhile, I was capturing titles as a champion athlete. And then in 1998, after my first nationals, I realized that there was a bodybuilding at the time had been a culture around drug use. And I saw the limitations within that model, and I thought I wanted to work on building optimization struggles outside of that model. And I continued on to that. I studied Eastern philosophy, Ayurvedic science, Chinese medicine, and nutritional components, and eventually was able to capture a bunch of titles and went to the Mr. Universe in 2003. But that's when, and I did it on a plant-based diet, which was really odd. Not that I'm advocating for a plant-based diet, but I wanted to add other elements and parameters to my process that would provide me, I would say, a unique aspect of the philosophy, or, you know, constraints that you could, there's a benefit to constraints, because you start, when you have constraints in a way, it allows you to come to conclusions that you might not come to if in a non-constrained system. And so the good news was I was able to win championships and that sort of thing. The bad news is I disrupted my digestive health because I had made some mistakes in that. And I met a doctor, Dr. Michael O'Brien, who is famous for recovering, you know, the who's who in the health and fitness industry, including Bernard Jensen, who wrote the book on digestion and health. And he was a household name in America, 64 books. And when he got sick with cancer, Dr. O'Brien came in and rebuilt him. He had also rebuilt himself. And he shared with me the role of enzymes and probiotics, key mineralization, the disruption in our agricultural products through commercialized farming and engineering, and how that had impacted our health and our performance overall. So basically, I had just gotten to the point, because I was pushing the limits as an athlete, I got to, quote unquote, the disease state in half the time it takes a normal person. You know, it's like if you drive the car 200 miles an hour, you'll wear it out way faster than if you're driving at 50 miles an hour.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the good news is I followed his philosophy, learned about that, rebuilt my digestive health, and was able to perform at an extremely high level. And then I started applying this at my holistic health clinic in Vancouver. And my business partner, Matt Gallant, was working in the online industry. He said, "Hey, this is a great story. You know, you're a world, you know, you're a Mr. Universe competitor that doesn't use drugs and as a vegetarian, I think we can make a business." And we did that. And then we started applying the digestive health principles to optimize performance, recovery, health, and stuff. And so from that, we started a little company. We coached over 15,000 people, and we built it up. And today that company is now known as BiOptimizers. And our ethos was, because we were so familiar with the industry and how there was a lot of Me Too products that were built by corporations based on, you know, margins, not missions. And we were on a mission to really break the paradigm of how well a person could live for their allotted time of life. Maybe we can extend life, but we felt for certain we could extend the quality of life if we were able to discover how to improve and deliver everything that the body required, while without overburdening it with an assortment of toxins, chemicals, and agents. And so from that, that's how we've crafted and built every single product in our company. And a number of years ago, we found that one of the big elements that was out there that was causing so much distress in the population was massive magnesium deficiency at levels that I think were really underestimated. And so we decided to go out and build the world's best magnesium product.
Wow, what a story. So, thanks to your mission over the years, you became one of the most trusted brand in the biohacking and health optimization community. Your journey is so inspiring. So, thanks for sharing.
Well, I'll share something that a lot of people don't consider. I think bodybuilders in general are the original biohackers. And why I say that is because in bodybuilding, you're trying to do two things that are in opposition to evolutionary biology. And so, for example, carrying excess muscle mass and having what I would say highly reduced body fat below the level. So you're above levels of optimal muscle mass, and you're below optimal levels of fat tissue, because you need a certain amount of fat in the body. And we've evolved to carry a certain amount of muscle, and we've evolved to carry a certain amount of body fat within a healthy range. But bodybuilders are trying to tip the apple cart in for an outcome. And unfortunately, they do that, and they push the limit and often get themselves in trouble. And it's one of the things I recognized in 1998. So then I was looking at, well, how do we optimize and offset these evolutionary tendencies to store body fat and to reduce muscle mass over time. And yet, interesting enough, those are the two elements which contribute to most of the disease states as we age.
Yeah.
Obesity being the number one factor in an untimely death, or the contributing factor between developmental issues or disease conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And muscle mass is one of the most important elements for living a well life. In other words, your ability to move around as you get older is dependent on how well you retain muscle mass. And so inadvertently, I learned about the principles of healthy aging from trying to solve the issues of bodybuilding, and of course now, so it was a natural as I got older, and now I'm, in my going on my 6th decade, so I just turned 50 recently.
Oh, mm-hmm. I
So
didn't.
now it's like, okay, um, what are these principles that is going to allow me to make the next 50 years commensurate with the last 50? And so we've been working on that for a long time.
Awesome. Yeah. Really, really nice. And I'm curious to hear from you. What's your definition of health?
That's a beautiful question, and almost no one does that. To me, health composes a lot of things. Number one, it's something that when you interact and engage in life, it is recognizable by those around you. In other words, there's a light in the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
There is an energy within the voice. The body is carried in a certain way that people can recognize as that person is light. They're vibrant. They have energy. They light up a room. So to me, that should be the end point of health, that it should be easily and demonstratively recognizable by the people that you're around. Second, from a more internal method, it is the precise flow in both optimal quantities and qualities of the elements that allows the body to work in perfect harmony like a symphony orchestra. And so when you have that internal mechanisms working, the externals automatically are automatically and observable by the population, even if they don't understand what the internal workings are. And so that's a combination of what you got genetics wise. It's a combination of the environment you have. It's a combination also of your mental attitude, as well as the habitual practices that you have worked out in your own life to optimize, the hand that you were dealt by God.
Fantastic, fantastic definition. I love it. And before talking about supplementation, it's crucial for me to talk about food. Why today food doesn't have the same content of nutrient that used to have 100 years ago?
Yeah, great question. So largely in part when the Industrial Revolution happened, according to my researches, and Canada has been a big food producer for many years. In fact, a large immigration process occurred in the United States and in Canada from Europe after both world wars for people looking that had skills in the realm of farming. And in what happened after World War II was very unique in the fact that there was a population explosion. And with that population explosion, known as the baby boom,
Mm-hmm.
Technology had allowed cultures to interact in ways they never had before. The development of radio and television, the war cultivated new shipping lanes, and all of these things started to happen where culture started interacting. People wanted they wanted orange juice from Florida, and they wanted, they wanted pasta from Italy, and they wanted bread from, the Ukraine or from, Canada or whatever. So there became this, coffee from South America. So all this exchange started to happen on a really large scale. And with this population explosion that happened with the Industrial revolution, people started moving to cities and manufacturing started to change. And we realized that there was less people producing food. And so governments began to create regulatory bodies, and scientists began to look at ways to increase food production. And what happened is we moved from the traditional methodologies that had been practiced for thousands of years in farming, where people had crop rotation, they would work minerals and manure into the soil to create probiotics and mineralization inside the soil, and then you grow tomatoes here one year and potatoes in that spot next year, and you'd plow hemp into it one year and you'd have a year of fallow. This was a regular cycle that happened in all cultures. Well, these industries said, well, we need to make these quotas. We need to create, staple foods, wheat and corn and soy and, all these different grains and stuff like that in order to meet the demands of the population. So they developed monoculture farming practices where you started using large industrial machines instead of manual labor. And you started to produce massive amounts of subsidized foods because they wanted to make sure that they could stabilize the food production, because famine has plagued humanity throughout history. And so the intentions around that, I think, were noble. And in doing that, the development of chemicalization now started to influence our farming culture. And so we realized, well, we could increase the yield if you added fertilizer to the crops. Well, yes, so you produce, say, corn faster, or you produce wheat faster, or whatever it happened to be. And the problem is that you extracted a great amount of the protein and minerals out of that food. So for example, if you look at wheat 100 years ago, which is a staple of, say, Canada, 90% of that, it was 90% protein. Today, it's less than 7%. There's been a degradation because of the accelerated growing techniques that have been used through monoculture farming. Also, with monoculture farming, you're not reconditioning the soil. So, fertilizer was accelerating it, but the essential minerals weren't used. And what happens is the plant will give up its protein, convert that to enzymes in order to do that. And so then what happened is the immune systems of the plants began to weaken, so they'd get different types of diseases and bugs. And so again came the science that says, well, we can develop chemical agents, that we could spray on them to kill the bugs or to kill the pests that were disrupting that. And that also disrupted the microbiome that's associated with the various plants. So under normal conditions, we would be eating plants that had the adequate amounts of protein content, enzyme content, probiotic content, as well as the concordant minerals. Now, today, with commercially grown food that's using all these chemical agents, and then multiple generations passed down for literally, like you said, almost, we're working on about 80 years now. The food that we're eating today is nothing like it was multiple generations before, which is leading to two aspects. One, a buildup of toxicity in people from the chemical agents that puts a load on the human body to remove. And second, a growing deficiency of key elements that were once present inside the food, minerals, vitamins, essential phytonutrients, that are now not present in these foods. So what we're getting for food is radically different, and nobody knows the difference. However, if you've gone to a traditional farm and ate a tomato, and then you go to the store and eat a tomato or a strawberry or whatever it happens to be, you can feel the difference between a commercially grown product on a monoculture farm versus something that has been an heirloom type product that has been passed on for generations. And people in the know understand the difference. But on mass, we have to address these nutritional deficiencies through the use of technology, because it would take so long for us to rejig our entire industrial complex of food production that it's not practical with the population size the way it is today.
Yeah, I agree 100%. This situation is really complicated. The soil depletion, minerals that are lacking in our diets are going to be a real challenge for most of us. if we want to live healthy life, eating healthy food is not enough. Can you tackle a little bit more on this topic?
Yeah. So one of the technology. So I always say technology got us into this problem, and technology applied in an intelligent way will get us out of it.
Mm.
So I do believe that the future ultimately will be adventing commercial growing practices or commercial or creating food production levels independently as our own selves through whether it's like you see hydroponic technology and things like that we may be able to grow plants in a way that is going to accelerate that, but that's going to be decades for that becomes really high level
Mm-hmm.
that would meet the needs of the food. So we have to look at the individual right now, you, the person, and you need to be able to make adjustments individually for a couple of things. I'd say to start off, you want to know your genetic predispositions and where you might have trouble absorbing some foods, what diet is right for you, what foods are minerals and vitamins might not manufacture well, and then you would look at your overall toxic load. So if you've been eating commercial farming, you can do like a Great Plains test. So you do a DNA, so you do a Great Plains test. You can test if you have major chemical products like glyphosates, for example, inside the system, which may disrupt your digestive system. You can do a gut map, which would look at your intestinal tract. Then you would look at maybe a hormone test to see if you have a disruption. A lot of people right now, because of the production of plastics and chemicals, have these hormone disruptors which are impacting our health. And then you would look at some of the big things like HOMO-IR, which is blood sugar regulation, and glucose management, how well you do that. And you could look at protein folding in your heart, which is a pulse test. And
Mm-hmm.
then once you got those basics, which you would do maybe once every 5 years or so, you get a really good snapshot of where your body is. And then I would look at what's called a SpectraCell test. And this will kind of lead into our conversation a little bit. The SpectraCell test is it's kind of a state-of-the-art test that doesn't measure the vitamins and minerals in your blood. It actually measures how much you're absorbing and utilizing inside your actual tissue. So
Mm-hmm.
you do a blood sample, but they spin it out, and they look inside the cells to see what you're getting in, which is very different than a test that you would get at a regular doctor who's just going to measure your serum levels, which isn't indicative that that's getting into the body where you need it. Now, with a SpectraCell test, you're going to clearly see if your diet is delivering you these essential vitamins and minerals that are important for living long and living strong. And one of the most common elements that we see is massive magnesium deficiency inside the population. And so there's a couple of reasons for that. One, going back to our manufacturing side of things, uh, the production of food, we've stripped out magnesium. Second, a lot of our dietary production requirements are fortified with calcium, and calcium operates in a 2-to-1 ratio. And if you have deficient in magnesium, you will increase, your body will drop calcium and try and neutralize the 2-to-1 ratio, which has a degenerative effect on our bone structure. And our bone structure is manufactures inside our bones manufactures stem cells, which is important for longevity, but it's also the framework. So osteoporosis is a very serious degenerative condition. It's the lattice work that also contains muscle mass. So regular exercise that keeps our muscle mass will help keep our bone stability, which will help produce our stem cells for aging, provided that we're providing enough calcium that we don't start dumping, or enough magnesium that we're not dumping calcium. So that's how I kind of step down between isolating what particular elements might be required. You could do the same thing, let's say, with essential fatty acids.
Mm-hmm.
You could look through how we have a disruption in our ratio of omega-3, 6s, and 9s. Many of our products are not producing enough of the essential, like the EPA, the DHA, and that's an issue for me. And then you can look at, and then we have these trans fatty acids and other fatty acids which are disruptive and bad for, say, our heart health or et cetera, et cetera. And so that you supplement the appropriate amount of essential fatty acid in your diet. And then that's going to vary with your own genetics to how well you absorb and utilize that, as well as the diet that you can stay, at your fittest and healthiest on. So all of those become a factor that you need to deal with the individual on a person-to-person basis, and then you supplement and optimize, just like I would develop a training program and a diet program for someone who wanted to lose 20 pounds or gain a few pounds of muscle, etc.
Great, I got you. And why do you call magnesium the master mineral? Why is one of the key elements to optimize our health?
Two reasons. One, it is involved in over 300 biochemical processes inside the body, enzymatic regulation, the control of a relaxation response in muscle tissue, both smooth and striated muscle. It's also involved in key neurotransmitter formation, particularly around serotonin production, which makes you feel good. It's also involved in blood sugar regulation, as well as um, vasodilation. So when you look at what is, killing people in the world, what are the things that takes people out? Well, obesity, which is usually related to blood sugar management, and then you look at, if you look at heart disease, so heart disease, the number one killer.
Mm-hmm.
Cancer is the number two killer, which is an overdependence on sugar products to maintain metabolism, which ultimately leads to unregulated growth. That's a simplified version of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have blood sugar management. And then we have the fourth leading cause of death is medical error due to contraindications of the chemicals or the drugs that we were treating the first three things with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when you look at magnesium, magnesium plays a role in all three of the big killers in sort of cancer, heart disease, and blood sugar regulation. It also is part of the relaxation response, which is appropriate for good sleep. Good sleep is a contributing factor to our adrenaline function in the body and how well we use cortisol. So why do we like coffee and get a thing going in the morning or stimulants and stuff? It's because of we need a jolt to the system, but how do you downregulate that system and to go into the relax and rest response is magnesium. And then there's a third element which is emerging, and I think this will become more understood as we go forward. We've increased electrical magnetic frequency production by trillions of times compared to our grandparents. And what's interesting is these waves are passing through us with, electricity and phones and the internet and all these things. These are waves going through what we call our heart's physical bodies, but we're actually mostly empty space from physics. The vibratory energy of that creates a stimulatory response that actually depletes our magnesium levels. And so with the rise of technology, magnesium requirements are increasing, while our magnesium accessibility from our diets is decreasing, creating pressure on both points. And when we fill that void with a well thought out full spectrum magnesium that's delivered to the various parts of the body, people start to report a variety of positive responses in what looks like a host of unrelated areas. And when people start seeing that, they go, well, how did magnesium make me sleep better? How did it make my migraines go away? How come I have more energy? How come, my bone density's up? All these different things. Well, it's because of the pressure points on the outside of those lanes, which is an evolutionary aspect of the modern world.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, everything is related. And why magnesium is the only nutrient that defeats stress at a cellular level?
Yeah, great question. So when I was first got into the magnesium equation, I was kind of wondering that question as well. And it went back to Charles Poliquin. And so he's the late, great sports trainer who he trained gold medalists in 27 different sports in the who's who of professional athletics. And so he had some interesting information, and I think he spoke 12 or 13 languages. He'd read research papers in other countries because there was biases within each country of how research dollars were allocated. And this would lead to certain conclusions in one country that you wouldn't come to another. And with his high performance athletes, he noticed two things. One um, was he would determine whether they could make a gold medalist or not by their neurotransmitter dominance. And he was the first guy to connect Western medicine with Eastern medicine through the 5 elements related to neurotransmitter dominance. And number two, he recognized that the ability of those athletes to train and recover was largely in part to their ability to rebuild their neurotransmitter levels so that they could train at a high level. And in order to produce the neurotransmitters to make your brain recover properly, guess what? Magnesium is one of the key elements in that process, particularly to create the relaxation, sense of connection response. Now, athletes tend to be they tend to be either dopamine or acetylcholine dominant, and when you pushing that in an athletic environment, you're going to deplete. You're also going to be subjected to problems within your serotonin system that connect to it. So that most athletes feel fine being focused for extensive periods of time, working very hard, oftentimes unknown to everyone else. So we see them as these kind of like grandstanding people at the Olympics or a professional sport, but their makeup is very focused and directed to subject themselves to decades of training. And oftentimes that creates a disconnection, and we've read about this in post-contest depression states and things like that. The other thing is when you're sweating a lot, you'll also deplete minerals. And so he started to realize that many of his athletes required, superhuman levels of magnesium to be able to maintain function both inside the sport and outside the sport. And he also found that there were different types of magnesium that were required, that were uptaken by the body in different levels. And so he was using different types of magnesium. And that's where the original groundwork for our Magnesium Breakthrough product came through. And then just we built off of Poliquin's experience, as well as a number of our own researchers, that we were able to accelerate and create a better product than anything that had ever been made before.
Wow, so interesting stories. And so you talk about magnesium and the different forms of magnesium. If people take just one form of magnesium, they are still deficient. Your Magnesium Breakthrough contains 7 forms of magnesium. Can you explain why it's important to get all 7 forms of magnesium if we want to transform our life? Can you walk us through the benefit of each one of the 7 forms and how they work on different parts of our body?
Sure thing. And just so people want to know, foods that are rich in magnesium are dark chocolate, avocados, like nuts, almonds, cashews, Brazil seeds, pumpkin, flax, and chia, bananas, leafy greens, tofu, and legumes. So that's you always want to find a base in that. And one of the things I always say, if you crave dark chocolate, you probably have a significant magnesium deficiency. So and chocolate, of course, is almost everybody craves it. Well, people don't realize that the craving is underlying a deficiency that your body's trying to get, and chocolate is a great source of that. Also, most people, when they eat nuts, especially if it's got a little bit of salt on it, they have very hard time controlling the portions that they're going to eat. And that's because of the sodium and magnesium, which are elements of our neurotransmitters. It's not so much the calories that we're trying to get, it's the sodium and magnesium components, which are often very supportive of a person's internal function, even though you can eat, several thousand calories in a couple minutes on some salt nuts. So let's get into the different types of magnesium that you will find in various types of magnesium supplements and what they all do. So we got common element magnesium chelate, which is involved in quieting the nervous system and helps produce neurotransmitters. Citrate, magnesium citrate. And by the way, when you hear this is just the chemical bond that's associated with the magnesium, and that will have a different size of the molecule, which will determine how well it's absorbed by different parts of the body. Magnesium citrate, that tends to be in the intestines more, and it'll draw water in there. So that can be used for laxative or acid indigestion. It's the one that is most associated with people getting the runs.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be very judicial about your use of citrate. Magnesium bisglycinate, the research around bisglycinate, of course, is they've seen positive effects on blood pressure, blood sugar regulation, like type 2 diabetes, because it assists in breakdown of sugars, osteoporosis, reducing the risk of brain fractures, migraine headaches, as it's a vasodilator, and depression because it's used as a precursor to serotonin. Now, I'm not saying it's a treatment for those things, but the research papers have been showing it's been very positive in that. Magnesium malate, that one is particularly involved in energy production and enzymatic activity inside the body. And of course, we were well known as an enzyme company. So people who are finding that are having energy production issues often find that malate is helpful for that. You'll hear of magnesium taurate. Taurate is kind of like a taurine mimicker, which is a neurotransmitter, and it's involved in cardiovascular health, blood pressure, vasodilation, again for migraines. And interesting enough, many people will start to improve their memory function, and partly because taurine acts as a GABA neurotransmitter, which is involved in that rest, calming, clear level. I used to drink a special tea for that. It also is increases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is stimulating new brain cells. And a lot of people, when they get really stressed, for example, have troubles with their memory or cognitive function when you're overstimulated or overstressed. And by bringing yourself back, your memory starts to return. Insulin sensitivity, and big one for ladies, PMS. If you're suffering from a lot of challenges from PMS, menstrual pain, irritability, bloating, and stuff, oftentimes it's because you're losing too much magnesium, and magnesium can offset some of those challenges. Then there's magnesium orotate. This is the one that's involved in regulating your heartbeats. So you see some athletes that get into disrupted heartbeats or premature heartbeats, often from increased activity. Also involved in radiant skin and reduction of calcification in the body. It's also been involved in improved availability of DNA and RNA for repaired and damaged tissue, so in the production of ATP. Aspartate, magnesium aspartate, this is for neuromuscular conditions, so the relaxation response inside the body and returning the body to acid-alkaline balance. So you'll keep your pH of your blood at a certain level. When you're too acidic, your body will dump things like magnesium into the blood to sort out the pH. And then we also have magnesium sucrosomial, which is a new type of highly bioavailable magnesium that we've added to the formulation, which is extremely well, and it's absorbed and utilized very well, and is associated with all of the benefits that we issued before. And then in combination with that, you have to look at how well is magnesium brought into the body. So you use things like humic and fulvic acid, a monoatomic blend. Humic and fulvic acid is the elements that plants use to convert inorganic minerals into bioavailable minerals. B6 and manganese are also delivery agents that accelerate the utilization of those magnesiums. And so we've put all of those into a specific formulation. I think we're on our 4th generation now, magnesium, to produce the best possible result by providing the precise amount of these elements in a unique way so that you can get more bang for your buck.
Great, fantastic overview on all the 7 forms of magnesium. Now that we have understood how critical magnesium is for everything, our listener will run out to a local drugstore or health food store and buy some magnesium. But why most magnesium supplements fail to help us to beat stress, get fit, sleep better, and recover faster?
Yeah, well, that's part of the issue that comes up, because almost all the magnesium companies will use 1 or 2 magnesiums in order to produce the product, and they'll say it's better for this. But the reality is you're not. It will be relative to that individual. And when I first got into the magnesium thing, I bought every single magnesium there was on the market. Had this, both Matt and I, we had this big counter full of stuff, and we were taking them independently and tracking the results when we get the runs and how we get the feel and the results in the body. It took us many months. And then the size of the molecules are different. So in order to produce a multi-type of magnesium that has all different types of magnesium, you have to have special machines and special capsules in order to hold the magnesium. And you want to reduce the excipients. Excipients are flow regulators because otherwise they'll all stick together. But most people use chemical excipients that we don't like, so we want to avoid those as well. So the production of producing a high quality magnesium without the negative excipients that will deliver all of them, no one's been able to do that until we figure that out. And so you're really only getting a fraction of the benefit if you're trying another magnesium. And there might be benefits to that, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be comparable to something that delivers to all parts of the body like a symphony.
Mm-hmm. So you explained us before that there are these tests that can determine what deficiencies we have and which particular vitamin and mineral we are not absorbing well. Can you remember me the name?
Yes.
His spectrum test, right?
SpectraCell is the name of the test.
Okay.
And for those who want to listen, they can go to my podcast, episode 25. I actually list all the tests that I just referred to at the first of our podcast and explain each one with my naturopathic doctor so that you can go through it and understand how each one uses and how they're related to each other. But the SpectraCell is definitely one that will transform your life because it gives the specificity to the deficiencies that you might have. And you can do that test, take some supplements over the course of, say, 6 months, come back to the test, and you can actually see that that they work. And that's very rewarding because now you're putting real data and science that you're applying to yourself individually. And that means, and rather than trying to take all the supplements out there in the world, you're applying specific supplements to your unique situation and getting them the most value out of them.
Excellent. And you often talk about the bucket theory of nutrition. Can you explain us what's that theory it's all about?
Yeah, and I illustrate that in my course, which I give away on my website, called the 84 Days. And it's basically 12 weeks of all the practices and principles allows you to achieve what I call awesome health, and that you feel awesome, look awesome, and are awesome. But the bucket theory is imagine your life force, if you will, or the collective capability of all your metabolic processes and expenditures and your ability to deliver that as a bucket. And in that bucket, you have to put in the elements that require you to produce it, like you would fill up a bucket with water. Now, there's a hole in that bucket, and the hole in the bucket is your lifestyle. In other words, that's how much of the essential elements are going to leak out of that bucket on any given day. Now, in the case of, say, any nutrient that you might be deficient in, if you're only taking the amount that's leaking out of the bucket, you never have a full bucket. Or if you're taking less than, eventually you run out and you have an associated complication relative to the deficiency of that product. And what I suggest people is to fill up the bucket in a fast process. And there is a science that was developed by Dr. Abraham Hoffer, Dr. Linus Pauling, and Dr. David Hawkins called orthomolecular nutrition. They started in the 70s. And what they were determined is that they were able to treat advanced states of illness by super loading of various elements inside the body. One of the most famous ones was vitamin C. So in other words, you would take vitamin C and you would take as divided dosage of the day till you broke the GI barrier, which means you got the runs. And then you would titrate down, you would lower the dosage to, let's say you got up to 10 grams, you would lower it to 9. When your body hit saturation again, you get the runs, you'd lower it to 8, and then you'd lower it to 7 until you only needed a small fraction of vitamin C every day, and then you would retain your functioning of the body. And so what I did is I extrapolated that information and started applying in my research facility to a variety of people. So I was like, okay, well, we've determined, for example, that you have X, Y, Z, you're deficient in magnesium, you're deficient in B12, and you're deficient in vitamin D. Okay, great. We're going to pick one of those things. independently, and we're going to increase the dosage uh, to your maximum tolerance level, and we're going to hold you there until that deficiency is completed, and then we're just going to reduce the dosage that you're taking, um, so that you replace what's coming out of your bucket. That's essentially it. And then you could systematically go through the deficiencies in your body. That way, you get the experience of what it's like to have a full bucket of that component, because most of the RDAs, the recommended daily allowances for elements, were based on the prevention of a disease. In other words, it is just the amount that would prevent you from getting scurvy or rickets or whatever it happened to be, the disease condition. But none of them were dealing with what would be the optimal levels. And so I believe that the body had a self-regulating system, which was known as, hey, I would feel either nauseated or I would get the runs if I was taking too much of a product. So we could use those, evolutionary biological systems that have cultivated over a million years of what was the top end, and we could look at the RDA, and we could look at the individual testing, and then we could apply that, fill up the bucket in every one of those nutrients, and see how people felt. Well, turns out they felt awesome,
Mm-hmm.
and they were like, wow, now I'm able to target my nutrition. I'm able to maximize the amount on an individual basis. And the variance between people is significant. Some people do well on, 500 milligrams of magnesium a day. I have other people that need 3 grams per day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't determine that from an RDA. You can only determine it from your own experience and your own application of that. And so that's what I suggest and recommend for all of our um, clients and the people that we interact with. And the results are extraordinary.
Wow. Yeah, it makes total sense for me, this explanation. And you also have developed a game changer formula to rebuild the nervous system in 90 days. How do you came up with this formula and what does it consist of?
Oh, you mean to repair the nervous system?
Yeah, with the magnesium.
Yeah. So one of the things that I did for myself, because I was running 3 companies, and even though I was at the high level, I was relying on stimulants and stuff and burnt myself out, and that's why I developed this.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you start at 2 capsules, which is about a half gram of magnesium, and you take it in 3 divided dosages. So you'd start out maybe 1.5 grams, so maybe in the morning, at lunch, and at dinner time. And then you'll add a half gram per day in divided doses. So you might add 1 capsule in the morning, 1 capsule in the afternoon, and then increase that. And maybe even if you keep going, you would add another example, like another serving, maybe before bed, until you get up to whatever your tolerance is, and your tolerance will be determined, you'll get the runs. So if, let's say you tolerate out to 3 grams a day, you'll stay at 3 grams for maybe 30 days, or till you start to notice your sleep's better, your functionality is better, your energy's better, you feel more relaxed, you're not emotionally reactive to stress in the system. And then you can titrate down, you'd lower that dosage down by a half gram, say on the 2nd month, or a gram, and then backwards until you're down to your maintenance dosage, which would be just keeping the bucket full. And for most people, that'll be somewhere between 2 capsules and 6 capsules per day, depending on their lifestyle.
Thank you. Yeah, and do you think it's easy to understand if it's magnesium lack or it's a hormonal problem? For example, for menopause women that don't sleep well, etc. Do you think it's easy to understand if it's a problem of hormone deficit, like with that we can solve with bioidentical hormone therapy, for example, or is a lack of magnesium? I don't know
I
if
think
I.
it's not independent of each other.
Okay.
I think they're actually correlations. And I think one of the big challenges that people have to overcome, and why I suggest, getting a holistic health practitioner who understands these interactions to look at your situation, is because they're correlated, not causated. In other words, you might have as we get older, a depletion of essential fatty acid components. You might have a reduction of your natural hormones and mineral deficiencies. So the doctor will be able to run those tests, and maybe you have a predisposition for osteoporosis, let's say, which
Mm-hmm.
is associated with those. So you look at that and you go, okay, well, I want to address that issue, and you're not sleeping well at night, which is also further disrupting your hormone intake. So you look at it and go, okay, well, based on this person, and I'm just theorizing here, we need to, number one, boost up their essential fatty acid. We probably want to add some magnesium to the diet, and we're going to need to do something either through resistance training or through going to a bone density clinic where you train once or twice a week on increasing bone density for that individual. And that once we've addressed those, we might look at adding just the precise amount of bioidentical hormones in order to optimize that woman's function. So, 6 months from now, she feels like her old self. Her bone density is going up. She has the elements to continue to support the hormonal stuff. Because when you add hormones, you solve the hormonal issues, but when you add hormones, that means that you're going to burn resources at a higher rate. And if you have a depletion in those key elements, you're going to run into some other problem down the road that you haven't addressed. So you want to have someone that understands the role of hormones and the utilization of the essential elements those hormones require in order to operate and interact properly in the body without creating challenges. And so that would be a suggestion that I would look at from that
Mm-hmm.
standpoint. And that's very low resolution, but just to give you an example of how
Yeah.
they all interact together.
Brilliant. And I know that you have a biohacker mindset. You love to experiment stuff. What are your favorite biohacks and what new habit has most improved your life?
Yeah, I would say neurofeedback. I've been to BioCybernaut, 40 years of Zen. These type of things has been extraordinary in increasing cognitive capacity, capability to handle stress, you know, thought processes in the body, which is related a lot to our health. Um, Increase in intelligence, memory, cognition, and these are demonstratable, as well as the cultivation of new skills that even at middle age, that now come easily to me, which I struggled with in my whole life. So that was
Mm-hmm.
a big one. I would also say that using the Conover protocol of
Mm-hmm.
NAD treatments has been extraordinary. I think it's really great. And on a week-to-week basis, I use things like an atmospheric cell trainer, which improves your mitochondrial strength and the density of that. Also, cryotherapy to reduce inflammation. I use PEMF technology, um, pulse electromagnetic frequencies. I have 3 different pulse electromagnetic frequencies in my body. I also think that HBOT
Mm-hmm.
has been great, as well as I have another machine called called a HOCAT
Uh-huh.
machine. It's really interesting, which combines a variety of technologies, right frequencies, ozone, uh, carbon dioxide, in a specific way. You do 3 minutes of that, and then 27 minutes in a capsule of steam, where the ozone then opens up, so the CO2 steps up and prepares you for the ozone. Then you do the ozone. You're running PMF current through it. You're using also oxygenation at that time, in combination with the NanoV technology, which
Uh-huh.
creates folded proteins. So I do all that sort of stuff on top of my biohacking, on top of my weight training, on top of my cardio. And I like that particular machine because I do like 10 different hacks all at one shot in 30 minutes.
Wow.
And so it's efficient on the time side. And then I'll go in and do stop here at Bulletproof Labs and do the cell trainer and cryotherapy. And then I have the PEMF devices at my house with the So I'll sit on my PMF device while I'm working and put a nano V on, and get my brain and my body and my physiology great while I'm doing something else. So I try to, and our elite clients, they do the same things. We stack things together to get the maximum benefits for a time efficiency factor.
Great. So sounds
And
really
and, and
exciting.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say that weight training and cardiovascular training are a big part. So if you look at longevity, the key elements of longevity, of living long but living a high quality life, are having top 2.5% of lean body mass. You only get that through resistance training, and 2.5% of cardiovascular health. So you get that through, biking or running or whatever. The mitochondrial stuff helps. And then working on your range of motion, which deals with quality of life as tends to age. So whatever that is, through massage, PMF, yoga movements, specificized stretching to offset whatever your patterns of movement that are binding you up. Those three areas will improve the quality of your day-to-day life, and the other stuff will allow the internal health to be at its best.
Wow. Yeah, my last question was, what is your longevity goal? So you anticipated me in this question, but maybe you have something more to add.
Well, it's funny, I get asked this all the time, and there's a tendency to kind of give these extraordinary results that I'm going to live to be 150 and all that sort of stuff. And I would say this, I think it's reasonable to say that I'd like to cross the centurion level. And I think somewhere between 100 and 120 is a reasonable, achievable goal, because we have people who have done that already, and technology is improving in likes of that. But I would say most importantly, I want to be able to live a highly functional life for the duration of it. Accidents, incidents happen, and that, so the longevity part's not a guarantee, but my quality of life. And I just turned 50, and, I'm in that range. We talked about muscle mass, lean body tissue, and cardio capability. So I got that side. I'm providing the elements on the nutrient side. I feel great. I look great, and I'm functioning maybe better than I ever have on a cognitive level, thanks to the neurological training. So the first half, I think, I've made some critical errors that cost me, but we're catching up on the backside, and we'll see how the next 50 go. And then at that point, we'll reassess at 100.
Fantastic. Yeah. So yeah, I'm 48, so I understand what you are feeling. So I'm just 2 years less than you, but yeah, my goal is also to live not longer, but to live in a good quality life. So I understand you. Thank you, Wade, for your time. It was a real pleasure to talk to you today. I would love to do another episode with you, maybe in the future, on probiotics and digestive enzyme, if you will. So I don't know.
We'll get that hooked up, because that's another big passion of mine, and I think it's the future, especially as we enter into a post-antibiotic age, which we are going to be in about 10 to 20 years. And we have a research facility that is solving those problems right now with our PhDs and master students who are working diligently every single day to break the paradigm of digestive health.
Great. So I will leave all your contacts in the show notes of my podcast. And Wade, have a good one. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.